Guy de Maupassant, Old Tuan. He was known throughout the entire region for 10 leagues around as Uncle Tuan, Fat Tuan, Tuan my vodka, and Tuan Mashbull, nicknamed the Burner, the innkeeper from Tournament. It was he who made this village famous, a hamlet lost in a hollow that sloped down to the sea, a wretched Norman settlement of a dozen peasant cottages, nestled among trees and surrounded by ditches. These huts huddled in a ravine, thickly overgrown with grass and bushes, beyond a sharp bend in the road from which the village itself took its name, Tournament. They seemed to have hidden away in this dip, like birds sheltering from a storm in deep furrows, seeking refuge from the sea wind, from the salty breath of the ocean vastness, a biting, burning breath that corrodes everything, stings like fire, parches and destroys like winter frost. And the whole village seemed to belong entirely to Antoine Mashbull, nicknamed the Burner, who was also called Tuan my vodka for his constant refrain, "My vodka is the best in all of France." By vodka, of course he meant brandy. For 20 years he had been plying the whole district with his vodka and his burnt brandy, and every time a customer asked, "What should I drink, Uncle Tuan?" he would invariably reply, "The burnt one, my boy. It'll warm your guts and clear your head. You won't find anything better for your health." He also had a habit of calling everyone my boy, though he had not a single daughter, neither married nor of marriageable age. And who didn't know Tuan the Burner, the fattest man in the whole canton, nay, in the whole region? His little house seemed absurdly low and cramped for such a giant, and seeing him standing in the doorway, where he spent whole days, people marveled at how he managed to squeeze through the door. And he would go in every time a new customer appeared, for it was customary to stand Tuan my vodka a drink, no matter what one was having oneself. The sign above his establishment read, "The Friends' Meeting Place," and Uncle Tuan was indeed a friend to each and every local. People came from Fee Camp and Montevilliers specifically to see him and listen to him, for this fat man could make anyone laugh. He knew how to poke fun at people without offending them. He could wink so meaningfully that everything was understood without words, and when he slapped his thigh in a fit of merriment, it was impossible not to laugh. It was even amusing just to watch him drink. He could drink any amount of anything, as long as someone was treating, and a sly glint would light up his eyes from the double pleasure. First, he was getting a free drink, and second, he was getting paid for it. The local wags would sometimes ask him, "Could you drink the sea, Uncle Tuan?" He would answer, "Why not? Only two things stop me. First, it's salty, and second, it's not bottled. And with a belly like mine, you can't drink from a cup that big." And his rose with his wife. There was something to hear. It was pure comedy, worth any price of admission. They had been married for 30 years, and for all 30 years they had bickered daily. But Uncle Tuan did it all in jest, while his old woman was truly furious. She was a tall, flat-chested peasant woman with long, thin legs like a heron's and angry, owlish eyes. She raised chickens in the yard behind the inn and was famous for her skill in fattening poultry. If any of the gentry in Fee Camp were expecting guests for dinner, a bird fattened by Mother Tuan was sure to be served. Without it, the meal wasn't considered proper. But her temper was foul. She was perpetually in a bad mood, angry at everyone and everything, and at her husband most of all, for his cheerfulness and his universal popularity, for his health and his bulk. She called him a lazy, good-for-nothing, because money came to him effortlessly, and a glutton because he ate and drank enough for 10 men. Not a day passed without her screaming at him, beside herself with rage. "You'd be better off in the pigsty, sitting there naked. You're sickening to look at. Nothing but blubber." And she would yell right in his face, "Just you wait, just you wait. You'll see what happens to you. You'll burst like a sack of grain, you great bloated wineskin." Tuan would roar with laughter and, slapping his belly, retort, "Ah, you chicken mother, you dried-up beanpole. Try and fatten your chicks like this. Go on, give it a try." And, rolling up the sleeve on his beefy arm, he would add, "Now this is a drumstick. Mother, have a look at that." The regulars at the inn would bang their fists on the tables, writhing with laughter, stamping their feet, and spitting on the floor in delight. And the infuriated old woman wouldn't let up. "Just you wait, just you wait. You'll see what happens. You'll burst like a sack of grain." And she would stalk off in a fury amidst the visitors' uproarious laughter. Indeed, it was impossible to look at Tuan without laughing. He was so fat and red, as if inflated. Over such lumpish men, death seems to mock, sneaking up on them stealthily, scheming and clowning, imparting something utterly comical through her slow, destructive work, instead of revealing herself as she does with others, openly, with gray hair, gauntness, wrinkles, failing strength, with all that makes one shudder and say, "Damn, how he's aged." The mischief maker amuses herself by piling on fat, reducing a man to a monstrous obesity, painting him in blues and reds, inflating him like a balloon until he looks supernaturally healthy. She disfigured Uncle Tuan, as she does all living things, but this disfigurement in him became not grim and sinister, as in others, but funny, clownishly amusing. "Just you wait, just you wait." Mother Tuan would not let up. "You'll see what happens." And this is what happened. Uncle Tuan was struck down by a seizure. The giant was laid on a bed in a tiny closet behind a wooden partition, so he could hear everything said in the tavern and converse with his friends. His mind remained clear, but his body, a massive, immobilized hulk, was paralyzed, and he could neither stir nor turn over. At first, they still nurtured a hope that his stout legs might regain some strength, but soon they had to abandon these hopes, and Tuan the Burner lay day and night on his bed, which was remade only once a week with the help of 4 neighbors. They would lift him by his arms and legs while the mattress was turned underneath him. Yet his cheerful disposition remained, only his merriment had changed. It had become meek and timid. He, like a child, had become afraid of his wife, and she nagged him from morning till night. "Well, you've really done it now, you lazy lard bucket, you good-for-nothing drunk. It serves you right, it serves you right." He no longer talked back, but only silently winked after her and turned to face the wall, the only movement he had left. He called this a turn to the north or a turn to the south. Now his chief solace was to eavesdrop on the conversations in the tavern and talk to his friends through the wall. Hearing a familiar voice, he would immediately shout, "Hey, Celestin, is that you, my boy?" And Celestin Maloisel would reply, "It's me, Uncle Tuan. What's this? Are you jumping about again, you lumbering old bear?" Tuan my vodka would answer, "Well, I'm not jumping, that's for sure. But I'm not wasting away either. The chest is still good, still strong." Later, he began inviting his closest friends into the little room to keep him company, though it pained him to watch them drink without him. He kept saying, "One thing's bad, my boy, without my vodka, the melancholy gets you, I swear. I don't give a hoot about anything else, but without a drink, it's hard going." Suddenly, Mother Tuan's owl-like face would appear at the window. The old woman would start shrieking, "Just look at him. Everyone, look at the pot-bellied layabout. Now I have to feed him and wash him and clean up after him, as if he were a stuck pig." When the old woman moved away, a red rooster would flutter up onto the windowsill, peer into the room with a round, curious eye, and fill the yard with a loud cock-a-doodle-doo. Or else a chicken or two would fly right up to the bed, pecking breadcrumbs from the floor. Uncle Tuan's friends soon abandoned their usual spots in the main room entirely and gathered every day after lunch to chat around the fat man's bed. Joker Tuan, even lying down, still managed to entertain them. That Slyboots could have made the devil himself laugh. 3 regulars came without fail. Celestin Maloisel, tall and thin, stooped like an old apple tree. Prosper Horsleville, short and wiry, with a ferret-like face, as malicious and cunning as a fox. And Césaire Pamel, who always remained silent but still shared in the general merriment. They would bring a board from the yard, lay it across the edge of the bed, and the company would sit down to play dominoes, and they would play, damn it, in earnest from 2 in the afternoon until 6 in the evening. But Mother Tuan became simply unbearable. She could not reconcile herself to the fact that her fat loafer was still having fun and playing dominoes, lounging in his bed. The moment the old woman noticed the game had started, she would burst in like a hurricane, overturn the board, snatch the dominoes, and carry them off to the tavern. Wasn't it enough, she'd say, that she had to feed this glutton, and she had no intention of watching him enjoy himself any longer? Was he doing it on purpose, really, to taunt honest folk who worked their fingers to the bone from morning till night? Celestin Maloisel and Césaire Pamel would just shift nervously from foot to foot, but Prosper Horsleville would start teasing the old woman. Her fury amused him. Once, seeing she was angrier than usual, he said to her, "You know, Mother, what'd I do if I were in your place?" She fell silent, staring at him in utter bewilderment with her owl-like eyes. Prosper began to explain. "That husband of yours is as hot as a stove, and he's not getting out of bed. If I were you, I'd set him to hatching eggs." She was dumbstruck, staring at the peasant's cunning face, certain he was mocking her. But he went on, "I'd tuck 5 or 6 eggs under each arm, left and right, on the very day a broody hen starts sitting. And once the chicks hatch, I'd carry them out to the clucking mother and let her raise them. Then you'd have flocks of poultry, Mother." The old woman asked in bewilderment, "Is such a thing even possible?" He replied, "Absolutely, and why not? If they can be hatched in a warm box, then it can be done in a bed." Struck by this logic, she fell silent at once and withdrew, deep in thought. A week later, she brought Tuan a full apron-load of eggs and announced, "I've set the yellow one on 10, and here's 10 for you, so you don't crush them." Tuan didn't understand and asked, "What do you want?" She answered, "For you to hatch the chicks, you idler." At first Tuan laughed, but the old woman stood her ground. He grew furious, dug his heels in, and refused outright to have chicken eggs tucked under his arm. Then the infuriated woman declared, "Until you take them, you get no food. We'll see then." A troubled Tuan fell silent. When the clock struck noon, he called to her, "Hey, Mother, is the soup ready?" The old woman called back from the kitchen, "There's no soup for you, you fat sluggard." He thought she was joking, waited a while, then began to plead, beg, and swear. In despair, he turned from north to south, hammered his fist against the wall, but in the end resigned himself to his fate and allowed 5 eggs to be placed under his left arm. Only then was he given his broth. When his friends arrived, they thought he had taken a turn for the worse. He seemed so strange and stiff. Then, as usual, they started a game of dominoes. But Uncle Tuan seemed to take no pleasure in it, moving his hand barely with the utmost caution. "What's wrong? Is your arm paralyzed?" inquired Horsleville. Tuan replied, "Feels like a weight's hanging from my shoulder." Suddenly, someone entered the tavern. The players fell silent. It was the mayor and his deputy. They ordered shots of brandy and began a conversation about local affairs. They spoke in hushed tones. Tuan, wanting to eavesdrop, pressed his ear to the wall and, making a sudden turn to the north, made scrambled eggs in his bed. He swore loudly. At his cry, Mother Tuan came rushing in and, instantly grasping the situation, tore the blanket off him. Seeing the yellow mess smeared all over her husband's side, she first stood frozen in outrage, unable to find words. Then, trembling from head to foot with fury, she flung herself upon the paralytic and began to pummel his stomach with all her might, as if beating laundry with a paddle at the stream. She drummed her fists against him, rapid fire, with a dull thudding. Tuan's three friends were roaring with laughter, choking, sneezing, and groaning, while the fat man merely defended himself cautiously from his wife's assault, afraid of crushing the eggs on his other side. In the end, Tuan capitulated. He had to hatch the eggs, forgetting dominoes and any sudden movements, for the malicious old woman starved him for every egg he broke. He lay on his back immobile, staring at the ceiling, arms spread out like wings, warming the chicken embryos in their white shells with his body. Now he spoke only in a whisper, as if afraid not merely to move, but even to make a noise, and he constantly worried about the yellow, broody hen, who was performing the same duty in the chicken coop as he was. He asked his wife, "Did you feed the yellow one for the night?" And the old woman hurried from the chickens to her husband and back again, wholly absorbed in caring for the future chicks that were hatching both in the bed and in the nests. Neighbors who had heard the story would come into the tavern curious and inquire after Tuan with great solemnity. They entered his room on tiptoe, as if entering a sick room, and asked with concern, "So how are things? Any movement?" Tuan would answer, "There's movement all right, but I'm plagued by this heat, and I get goosebumps all over." Then one morning the old woman rushed in, highly agitated, and announced, "The yellow one has hatched 7, and 3 were addled." Tuan's heart skipped a beat. How many would he have? "Soon, you say?" he asked anxiously, like a woman in labor. The old woman, afraid of jinxing it, grunted irritably. "Must be soon," and they began to wait. Tuan's friends, who knew the time was near, also gathered. They were anxious too. The whole village talked of nothing else, constantly running to each other for news. Around 3 o'clock, Tuan dozed off. He now spent half the day asleep. Suddenly, he was awakened by an unfamiliar tickling under his right side. He reached his left hand over, and something alive, covered in yellow down, stirred beneath his fingers. He was so startled that he cried out and released the chick, which went scampering across his chest. The tavern was packed at that moment. Everyone rushed to the door, cramming the tiny room to bursting, surrounding Tuan's bed like a magician's tent, while the old woman, who had run over, carefully extricated the chick tangled in her husband's beard. A hushed silence fell over everyone. The day was hot, typical for April. Through the wide-open window came the anxious clucking of a yellow broody hen, calling her newborn chicks. Tuan, sweaty from excitement, anxiety, and anticipation, whispered, "And now another one is hatched under my left arm." His wife thrust her long, bony hand into the bed and extracted a second chick with the same dexterity and care a midwife uses to deliver a newborn. The neighbors were eager to get a look at it. The chick was passed from hand to hand, examined as if it were a rare curiosity. For the next 20 minutes, nothing happened, but then 4 hatched all at once. The onlookers grew excited, and Tuan smiled, delighted by this luck, and began to feel pride in his unusual fatherhood. A man like him was a rarity indeed. One odd character he truly was. He proclaimed, "6. Now, that's a proper christening, by God." The crowd burst into loud laughter. A new crowd of gawkers packed into the tavern. The rest jostled at the door, waiting their turn. Everyone was asking each other, "How many does he have now?" 6. The old woman carried this new addition out to the broody hen, who clucked desperately, ruffling her feathers and spreading her wings to cover all her chicks at once. "Another one!" shouted Tuan. But he was mistaken. There were 3. This was a true triumph. The very last chick worked its way out of the shell by 7 o'clock in the evening. All the eggs had been fertile. Tuan, wild with delight, in a surge of tenderness, pressed his lips to the back of the fragile chick, nearly smothering it. He was overcome with a maternal feeling for this tiny creature to which he had given life, and he resolved to keep the chick in his bed until morning. However, the old woman, heedless of her husband's pleas, carried this one out to the broody hen too. The admiring spectators gradually dispersed, animatedly discussing the event. Only Horsleville lingered, and finding himself alone, remarked, "Listen, Uncle Tuan, you owe me the first treat when these chicks are fit for frying." At the thought of fried chicken, Tuan's face lit up with a smile, and the fat man replied, "You'll get it, my boy, of course you will.